All right, we got a very interesting chapter here. In chapter 7, we're going to talk about intelligence and other academic skills. This is a very interesting chapter because it brings up so much heated debate. I think I said it earlier, but I mean, obviously, it's going to be a theme here. People say, well, what is intelligence? We'll talk about some potential definitions, but nobody can agree on it. So, why is it important if nobody even understands what the heck it is? Well, we'll turn it into a score. A score? A number? Yeah, we're going to take some nebulous thing inside your head that nobody really defines or understands, and we'll somehow quantify that into a number on paper. And some people say, well, I'm a bad test taker and whatever. And well, we're going to quantify this thing and put it on paper. But we don't know what it is. But guess what? The score that number on that piece of paper can predict some amazing things about who we are, what we do, and what we accomplish in life. Okay, as unfair as it might be, as uncool as how I'm a bad testing or whatever it might be, is irrelevant because that number predicts success in life. It just does. It's a crazy number, and people are always like, well, "It's not fair. It's nature. It's nurture." We'll get into a whole nature nurture question. But as far as the ability to predict who will succeed in life, it's irrelevant. If that number is high, you're more successful in life. If that number is lower, you're less successful. I mean, it's correlation. Remember, there's always exceptions with correlations. But even though we don't know what it is, it's the single most important thing to predict outcomes in academia and in life. All right, so here's a couple of questions. I like this slide. I have this slide. In fact, anytime I talk intelligence in any class, this one's up. Okay? What is intelligence? I mean, class questions. It's an online class. I'm waiting for your answers. What is intelligence, class? What a quiet room. All right. Do you judge other people's intelligence? Yes. I'm not judgmental. Yes, you are judgmental. You are very, very judgmental. You judge other people's intelligence constantly. You judge it based on the clothing they wear. You judge them based on, all right, it's just you do. Everybody does. What do we look for? We look for a lot of things, all right? Intelligence looks like a lot of things, and we look for different stuff. And yes, we are judgmental. Are more intelligent people more happy? I'm going to tell you something. More intelligent people tend to end up with more education. More education means a lot of different things. The more education you get, of course you make more money as a general rule with more education. But perhaps more importantly, the more education you get, the more choices you make in life, the more options you have. In particular, let's say, the job you take. Okay? The higher your education level, the more likely you are to choose the job you want rather than be stuck with a job you don't particularly want. How important is it in our society to be intelligent? Very important. Oh my goodness. If we think about SAT tests as intelligence tests, which they are, how much harder, how much more can we look at? Undergrad and graduate schooling, yeah, okay. Are less intelligent people more likely to commit crimes? Oh shit. Wow, that sounds horrible. However, if you look at in general, the intelligence level of violent criminals, you're going to find, in general, that they are tending to be fairly low. Again, it goes back to people with a higher intelligence, whatever it means, all right, we're going to get into that, whatever that means, tend to get more education and get more opportunities. But guess what? Everybody wants a flat screen television because they're awesome. And some people have the income to be able to afford such a thing. But even people that don't have the income for a variety of reasons still want a flat screen television. That's just how it works. Okay? Why do you think intelligence is such an emotional issue? Of course, it's a whole nature nurture thing. But in my mind, the reason that intelligence is such a hot button topic, and boy, we're going to lay this out, is that it's an issue of fairness, okay? We like to think America is a land of opportunity and everybody's got a shot. But you know what? We're going to talk about little Johnny. And little Johnny, the moment egg met sperm, there was no way Johnny was ever going to be president. And we're like, we don't dig that. We don't, no. This is a land of opportunity. Just ask the Republicans, I'll tell you. All you got to do is hard work and then you too will succeed, right? It's like, sorry, Johnny, I don't give a shit, man. Johnny could be working 90 hours a week. He could be putting everything he has into it, but little Johnny is screwed. He is never going to become what those Republicans swear is possible. I'm sorry for the politics, but what a load of shit, okay? So anyway, I got it. Hard work is important, but you know what? Little Johnny is effed. It doesn't matter how hard little Johnny works, because that's what happened when egg met sperm. All right. So let's define intelligence a little bit now that we got all of that out of my system. Not really, I'll come back to it. Defining intelligence. Intelligence is, I like to, see when I define intelligence, like I said, nobody can really agree on a definition. So when I define it, I like to consider other animals, not just humans, and think about this definition to incorporate. And so I kind of think about it, again, you know I'm a big fan of evolution. So I define this in terms of the ability to adapt to your environment, the ability to modify your behaviors to fit, or to modify your environment to fit your needs, okay? In other words, intelligence really is those mental abilities which allow us to adapt to our environment to survive, to reproduce, okay? However, you know, these abilities in general must involve the ability to profit from experience. I mean, if you make a mistake, that's fine. That's what learning's all about. If you make it twice, shame on you, right? But the ability to solve problems, like if you're a bumblebee, you need to be able to solve problems such as which flower is bigger, therefore has more nectar, right? We have more complex problems, but, you know, we have the same problems about adapting and surviving. Abilities might involve reasoning effectively or meeting challenges and achieving goals, but whatever. Mental abilities needed to select your environment, adapt your environment, modify your environment, survive and reproduce, really is what it comes down to. There's big cultural differences in intelligence. At some point, we're going to talk about cultural differences in defining the self. It's going to be very cool, the Marcus and Kitayama model of self. Suffice it to say for now, though, Western cultures view intelligence as a means for individuals to devise categories and to engage in rational debate. In other words, an intelligent person in the West is somebody who has skills which make them rise to the top. In Eastern cultures, intelligence is seen as a way for members of a community to recognize contradiction and complexity and to play their social roles successfully. In other words, in non-Western countries, intelligence is often seen as the ability to get along well with other people. Okay? So, don't get me wrong, here in the East, or in the West, we also have ideas of social intelligence and emotional intelligence. We'll come back to those. But social and emotional intelligence clearly take a back seat in the West to individual intellectual skills that allow us to, whereas this social and emotional type intelligence that we might be talking about perhaps takes center stage in Eastern thought. We talked about this the other day, but it's one way to define intelligence, so I'm not going to really talk it. I believe it was chapter 6. We just talked about this. Right? Intelligence. I already said this. And it doesn't say. Okay. Often intelligence is measured with paper and pencil tests, or physical measurements, by the way. Sometimes it involves how fast can you decode these letters or something. I don't know. I mean, they could involve physical manipulations or problems to solve or something too. I'm going to, well, okay, how about this? One of the ways that we think about intelligence is called Spearman's two-factor theory. When we talk about intelligence, I mean, I want to say it's nature and nurture, right? Intelligence is nature and nurture, right? Okay. Now, general intelligence is in some ways what you're born with, some potential. Okay, remember we always say nature is a leash, and it determines how far your environmental influences could take you. Okay, like little Johnny. Okay, little Johnny was born. He was from the beginning. What happened? His nature set him at a low point. Yes, if little Johnny has a wonderfully stimulating environment, little Johnny may well do all right. Okay, and if little Johnny has a bad environment, boy, he is completely screwed. Okay, but little Johnny's never making it up into the upper echelons. He is never going to be a CEO. This is just not in Johnny's abilities, no matter how hard he works. Well, general intelligence is sort of like this idea of what nature's kind of laid out there for you. Now, this nature manifests itself in a lot of places, okay? Because clearly little Johnny has different skills, right? Little Johnny's skill in music might be pretty good, and little Johnny's skills in math might be, and little Johnny's skills in spelling are, and they're all different. But all of these individual skills, and we're going to talk, different researchers have different ideas about how many of these specific intelligences we have, but these specific intelligences are all tied in a leash-like pattern to the general intelligence. Let me see if I can draw this one on the board, because this is a pretty good idea. Okay? So what do we got here? We got this idea. Okay? Here is little Johnny. You ready for little Johnny? Okay. Here's little Johnny's G. His general intelligence, his basic potential that he starts with. Then little Johnny has parents that really like jazz music, and they really encourage little Johnny. And so little Johnny's music intelligence might be here. But little Johnny's parents don't really understand math that well, and they don't encourage him. So little Johnny's math might be here. Little Johnny really likes spelling because his teacher was very encouraging of him when he was a kid. And we could talk about all kinds of other intelligences, some up, some down, etc. Okay? And this could be little Johnny's profile. And that's lovely. And so now we can say, everybody has a special talent. That's right. Little Johnny has a special talent. Right there it is. Okay? But now check this out. Little Billy, on the other hand, he was lucky when he was born. When egg met sperm, some magical things happened. And little Billy's G scores, G level is right here. G is way up here. Okay? And so now what happens is little Billy also has his own profile of stuff, right? And whatever, some better, some worse, based on what little Billy's experiences are, what little Billy's parents encouraged, and what successes and failures little Billy had. But here's the drill, okay? Everybody has a special talent, and here's Johnny's special talent. But look at Johnny's special talent level. It's lower than almost everything that Billy has to offer, okay? So as a general rule, I mean, Billy's just got an advantage in everything. Yes, it's true that little Johnny has a special skill, but even Johnny's special skill doesn't even approach the average skill of little Billy. Little Billy's average skill far exceeds Johnny's highest skill. And so, yeah, the world is not fair. That's what it comes down to, and that's why this whole concept of intelligence is a hot-button topic. We in America just don't like unfair. This is a land of opportunity. Yes, it is. Okay? It really is. But, all right, so how many different specific intelligences are there? Well, there's lots of debate, but that basic idea of the G factor and the specifics kind of holds. Thurstone identified 7 mental abilities. Guilford identified 150. Cattell and Horn proposed fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence, and then some other it's irrelevant, really. It's not irrelevant, but for this course, it's irrelevant exactly how many specific factors, because they all basically fall into the same model with a general intelligence and then some specific ones which are in some ways tied in a leash-like fashion to it. The triarchic theory of intelligence is interesting. This is a little off of that idea. This is pretty cool, and this is this notion. componential subtheory. Oof. In other words, it's sort of, I'm going to simplify it greatly because I just don't want to spend my years on this. Basically, nature and nurture, but then it has, as a third component, it has the contextual subtheory, which is basically saying intelligence manifests itself differently in different contexts. Some kids might be school smart, but when it comes to like actually using it out in the street, they're idiots. All right. So we could talk about nature and nurture, and some kids have more analytical abilities than others, and others born that way. And some kids are pushed harder by their parents than other kids, sure. And then again, to take it further, in different contexts, they may manifest themselves extremely or not. So it's nature, nurture plus context. There's your thing. Theory of multiple. I don't know this. Intelligence is a biopsychological potential. Okay, the G factor. Gardner had 8. Well, anyway, it's interesting. Gardner takes it a little bit different. Again, it's the same kind of an idea, G in specifics. But he says there's 8, and what it does is each person has their own unique combination. There's almost like a finger. Where's my camera? There it is. A fingerprint. Okay? It's like a fingerprint for intelligence. Everybody is unique. But see, the problem is, and again, it takes advantage of this context thing. It says, I like this. The same profile, even though it's a fingerprint and it's unique or whatever, but the same profile might become a psychiatrist or a con man. Because both basically require the same sets of intelligences, the same sets of understanding interpersonal interactions and relationships. So the same person put into 2 different situations could become 2 radically different outcomes. Okay? That's really pretty cool. A given intelligence can be activated in many different ways, or a given intelligence profile, perhaps, can be activated in many different ways. And so he breaks it down into linguistic, logical, mathematical, musical. If I had to pick a person who is the most influential as far as that question of specific intelligences, Gardner is it. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence and stuff. Okay? But again, all of these are mental abilities which allow us to adapt to our environment, to modify environment, to shape the environment, to solve problems, to survive and reproduce, ultimately, from, again, that evolutionary perspective. So they all come down to that same basic idea. What are the implications? Gardner's implications? A curriculum based on the 3 R's is no good. I mean, it's just not the best. Because there's 8 different intelligences, and you're like, 3 R's. I don't know how your math goes, but 3 and 8 don't match each other. Okay? So if you allow children to self-select classes, and I find this important. This is a good point. I'm gonna leave it at this. Now it's summertime, and so my job as a daddy is to make sure that my kids get stimulated across the board. Okay? That's my job for the summer. I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to the 8 intelligences, but I definitely subscribe to the idea that the 3 R's my kids are getting in school are important because my kids have to take them standardized testing, and that's what it's based on. But, and this is huge, okay? This is a light bulb moment. This is what I call it, the light bulb moment. You're going to love this. My son he's a straight A student. He's no problem with this. And so, a couple months ago, I said, we got to change the light bulb. And he looks at me like, huh? You're kidding me. He couldn't even fathom such an idea. He couldn't even fathom the idea that he's 13, and he couldn't even fathom the idea that he could change a light bulb. And I'm like, okay, that's my light bulb moment, right? And I'm like, ding! I'm like, oh shit. Okay, it's my job as dad to teach this boy to be a man, because his school is not going to teach him to be a man, all right? His school is not going to teach him anything useful in life. They're going to teach him the 3 R's. And I'm like, okay, dude, you need to be able to, lay a wood floor. You need to I made the boy work with me last weekend, and we built a fire pit together, all right? We built a fire pit in our backyard. We top to bottom, front to back, we went to the Home Depot, the whole pile. Granted, I did most of the work, but I made him sit there and figure it out with me, okay? So it's an interesting idea that a school curriculum based on the 3 R's is just not enough, okay? If you allow children to self-select classes, they usually end up stimulating all of these different intelligences. That's right. And I mean, during this summer here, my kids are going to Tarrant County College. They have this wonderful program they're called College for Kids, and the kids take different classes and different things, and my kids are going to be taking classes in Spanish and golf and dance. I don't even remember what it all is, but they've got all these different chess, musical theater. That was a couple of years ago, but it's the same thing. I mean, my kids are getting all of these different things stimulated because they aren't getting it at school. Okay. Okay. Creativity is a little bit different. I'm going to tell you an interesting story. As part of my job at school, I had a lot of hats I must wear, and one of them I'm working on something called the QEP at the university, something which you will be hearing more about in the coming years. And a QEP, a quality enhancement plan, is basically a plan that the university puts together that it's part of the accreditation process, if you're familiar with any of that. But a plan that we put together where we identify something that we are not doing so good at, and we identify a way to address it, okay? So we as a university have identified critical thinking, that our students when they graduate are not being very good critical thinkers, partly because they're coming out of the schools with the 3 R's. We're not teaching them to think critically. We're just like, okay, here, memorize this information and puke it on a page. It's like, that's not it. You have no idea how many students that come into my classroom and they sit down and they tell me, I had straight A's in high school. And I'm like, you're kidding, right? Nothing. There's no critical thought. There's no deeper thinking. Well, as part of this QEP, this plan to enhance critical thinking, basically, I mean, we're in the process of coming up with a better name than that, but suffice it to say, the basic goal is enhancing critical thought, okay, and ability to critically think. And so the first step was to define critical thinking. And being the psychologist on the committee, they clearly they relied, my input here. And the definition of critical thinking that we as a university have gone with actually is one where I merged the definitions of creativity and wisdom. I took creativity and wisdom and jammed them together in some way to define critical thinking. And so creativity is a capacity for original thinking and problem solving, an ability to do things in new or different ways. See, now, creativity is clearly different from intelligence because I can envision artificial intelligence. Remember we talked about that. If you just want the car to drive you, you don't give a crap if it's, real artificial intelligence or fake? I can't remember the name of it. You should, because you got to take a test on it. But I forgot the name. That was, whatever. Creativity, however, is not something I can imagine my computer doing at the moment. Computers, have you ever seen an artificial intelligence computer create poetry? It's creative, I'll tell you that. Just not in quite the way we might imagine. Creative thought is not random or effortless. They're intentional. You need to have, at minimum, average intelligence. And what's interesting is creativity. See, I think I said this earlier. I'm not a big fan of just pure memorization, right? I just talked about it, memory dumping, puke on a page. And I'm not a big fan. It's just like if I want to know the answer, Siri will give it to me. Remember how wonderful Siri is? And so we say, all right, that's cool and everything. But in order to be creative, you have to have access to a large base of information, and you must understand how that information works together. Okay? So creativity is huge. I mean, this is clearly the thing that separates us from any form of artificial intelligence. All right, so now let's talk about testing intelligence, because this is where it gets really controversial. I'm talking about the point, because IQ testing gets misused a lot, so I'm kind of talking about the rules as in what we're supposed to do. IQ testing, intelligence testing should allow us to recognize those who might benefit from early intervention. That's right. The point behind intelligence testing when it was first created by Binet, and I'll talk about that, was to identify those kids that needed help. That's it. That was the point. Second, we must be careful that intelligence test scores do not become a literal measure of a person's worth or fixed potential. Yeah, again, going back to Binet, which, again, I'll talk about it, whatever. Binet was really not happy when it was, who put it together? Sturberg? No, I can't remember. Whatever. It was definitely not Binet who put together the idea of intelligence as a single number, the IQ score. That was a later invention. And that was something that was frowned upon in the earliest work because it was literally, you couldn't take such a complex thing and make a single number out of it. Intelligence test scores only reflect one aspect of personal competence. Got it. Remember we talked about social intelligence and creativity and all these other things, which are in fact independent, which are in fact important parts of adapting to our environment. But it all started out with, in fact, this is Francis Galton, who is who was, dude's dead now, Charles Darwin's cousin. And here's what he argues. He argued that intelligence is a matter of sensory acuity. Says humans can only know the world through the senses. That is to say, everything you know about the world came in through your eyes or your nose or your mouth. That's how you know the world. And if those eyes and those ears are better, then you have better access to the world. That actually kind of makes some freaky sense. The more acute the senses, the more intelligent a person is. Because sensory acuity is mainly inherited, that's right, it is an inherited thing. So is intelligence. Ooh, okay. So far the logic is it's all right so far. If intelligence is hereditary, then extreme highs and lows should run in families. Ooh, it does, doesn't it? So he wrote a book called Hereditary Genius, an inquiry into its laws and consequences. He does admit that, of course, you need hard work in order to make this happen. But clearly, from the beginning, intelligence was given to be primarily a nature kind of thing. Very little nurture involved, some nurture. He didn't completely dismiss it, but very little. So now, let's take this further. His logic so far is pretty logical. It's flawed, by the way, but it's interesting logic. If intelligence is inherited, by the way, intelligence is inherited. I'm going to tell you that we can breed rats that are either smart or dumb. It's really quite easy to do. Rats, you can take these rats, you take 100 rats and you throw them into a maze and you find out which ones are better at the maze and which are worse at the maze. And then you keep the top 10 and the bottom 10 and you separate them and you isolate them in the middle. The 80 in the middle, you put away someplace else. You let the top 10 and the bottom 10 breed with each other. They have babies. Their babies have babies, and you keep them separated and you keep them isolated and you breed them together. And within 5 generations, there is just zero overlap between the smartest and the dumbest. There's just nothing. This group is completely, they do not even look anything like this group. And it only took 5 or 6 generations of isolation. Clearly, it is an inherited trait. It is an inherited trait. Not for the reason that Galton proposed, but it is an inherited trait. So now, if intelligence is inherited, then could the general intelligence of a people be improved by allowing the brightest people to mate and discouraging the mating of people who are less bright? Yeah, that's what happened with rats. And I have no reason to believe that a rat and a human are any different in this one, okay? I have no reason to believe it at all. So now, take the logic further. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. Eugenics, the use of selective breeding to increase the general intelligence of the population. There were some very firm believers that it is our job to improve the human population. Government should pay smart people to have kids. Oh my. Government should pay to educate those kids. Eventually it evolved into sterilization laws, where at many clinics, when these people would come in, when certain people would come in, they would become sterilized whether they wanted to or not. It was just part of the process. It became a very common procedure, in fact, at mental hospitals. When admitted into the mental hospital, The first thing that gets done is sterilization. Bang. That's it. And they said, hey, we're doing it because we got to deal with this hospital. We can't be dealing with babies here too, you know? All right. So as we said, Simon, Benet and the student Simon. Alfred Benet in France, basically here's the gist of the story. France was experiencing its own little industrial revolution, and there was a massive flow of people from the countryside into the cities, and so these classrooms are starting to get very, very full, and these teachers are sitting there going, okay, you know what, this kid, he's stupid, get him out of my classroom. And I'm like, the kid's future was determined by some subjective thing based on this teacher's just subjective, you know, oh, he's been in here 5 minutes and he didn't know the capital of France. What a moron. And so you just kick him out, you know? Well, they said, okay, the government of France said, okay, you know what? We need to have not a subjective way to do this. We need to have an objective way to figure out which kids need more help, okay? Not just some teacher making a subjective, he's an idiot, okay? So he put together, basically, he found thousands of children that were clearly normal children, and he figured out what they know, basically. Kind of complicated, but basically he comes out and he says, the average 5-year-old knows this. The average 6-year-old knows this. The average 7-year-old knows this. Okay? And so he found out what the average child looked like. Then he took a kid, and here's this kid, and he's 7 years old, and this 7-year-old kid, he tested him, and this 7-year-old kid, he tests, and this boy who is actually 7 has knowledge that the average 8-year-old has, if that makes any sense. And so we can talk about the difference between chronological age and mental age. See, chronological age is what this kid's actual age is, whereas mental age is the performance that this kid has. And so you compare the two, and clearly if a kid's mental age is above their chronological age, you're in good shape. If the kid's mental age is below their chronological age, that's where discussion comes in. Now, there was no hard and set rule, but Benet felt that if a child was 2 years behind their if a child's mental age was 2 years behind their chronological age, that kid could probably be okay into a regular classroom. He might need a little bit of extra from his teacher, but would be all right. If you were 3 years, forget it. You would not benefit from this classroom. Think Vygotsky, right? And you remember the whole... Okay, so that's a Vygotsky kind of thing, even though he didn't know Vygotsky. So he said, if the kid is 3 years down, he will not benefit. Will not benefit in a regular classroom. You've got to put that kid into a special ed. And so that was it. That was the only thing Benet had in mind. That was it. There was no, let's quantify it and turn it into a number. No. That was much later. So somebody else took that notion, mental age divided by chronological age times 100, to create this thing called an intelligence quotient, an IQ, where the average IQ is 100. If a 7-year-old boy has a knowledge of the average 7-year-old, that 7 divided by 7 equals 1, take that times 100, and lo and behold, the IQ of a kid, the IQ of a 7-year-old boy that knows what the average 7-year-old knows is 100, right? Because that's what we would have to assume the average child is. Turns out that this idea of intelligence is normally distributed. This is a different class. Perhaps this is for your statistics class more. But suffice it to say, along this axis here is sort of like frequency or number of people that achieve these scores. And so if the curve is higher, that means more people are achieving that point on the curve. And so the highest point we see is right here at 100, which is to say the score of 100 is the most frequent score there is. Scores that deviate away become less frequent. Okay? So a score of 85 over here is much less frequent, or fewer people have this than this. But we also find that a score of 85 is equally likely as a score of 115. You know, in both directions of the average, both sides of the average, it's the same. So it's what we call a bell-shaped curve, and the further out you get, the fewer and fewer, and it drops off quite rapidly. So we see when we get out to an IQ score of 145, we're talking, this number right here is so incredibly low. We're at 0.01% of the population falling out this way, or 0.1%, whatever. All right, that's cool, good stuff. Robert Yerkes took the IQ test and modified it with paper and pencil. Before that, it was all hands-on. But Yerkes was actually charged by, was given the job to test the intelligence level of recruits for World War I to identify which ones should be soldiers, which ones should be officers, and which ones were just too stupid to serve in the Army. So he created a paper and pencil test where he could go boom and work it out. But then he found that 40% of the recruits could not read. And he was like, oh shit, okay. You got to remember that the rate of immigration in America at that point was very, very, very high. And so he created two different versions to, using a paper and pencil test and just bang, get it out there. And the U.S. government did, in fact, listen quite strongly to his recommendations about which recruits should become officers. But as far as the other side goes, there was, Yerkes, maybe 1% of the recruits, he said these guys are just too dumb to hold a gun. And the Army ignored that and let everyone in anyway. Ooh, U.S. Army, there we go. Here are some sample questions, by the way, from that test. They're kind of cute. A regiment marched 40 miles in 5 days. The first day they marched 9 miles. The second day 6 miles. The third 10 miles. The fourth 6 miles. How many miles did they march the last day? Okay, so it's just a subtraction kind of a thing. If you buy 2 packages of tobacco at 8 cents each and a pipe for 65 cents, how much change should you get from a $2 bill? That's awesome. If it takes 4 men 3 days to dig a 120-foot drain, how many men are needed to dig it in half a day? All right, I love it. That's just wonderful, wonderful stuff. They had another one where, say, for example, and this is very interesting, they'd show you these images and then they'd say, what is missing? This is a pretty ugly image. Suffice it to say, like the violin is missing its strings, the rabbit is missing an ear, the gun is missing a trigger, you can't really see it. This one is the one that killed me, man. The pocket knife is missing the rivet that holds it together. Holy shit, are you kidding me? So I don't pass your intelligence test because I didn't know there was supposed to be a rivet and a knife there. Whatever, it is what it is, man. Clearly, interesting item. So intelligence testing, I want to take it further because it's gotten this bad rap, as I said, but it's got useful purposes too. Let me put it in context with the uses. You can use it to diagnose children that have cognitive deficits. If a child scores incredibly low on this test, it means you better get in there and help this kid out because this kid is going to be screwed if you don't get in there and work with him. Okay? Can be used to diagnose learning disabilities, in particular specific problems in, let's say, only one area, like math or something. Can also be used to diagnose attention deficits or problems with, I already said that. It's part of a larger picture. But let's say, for example, even, all right, how about this? Let's say, again, this is child psych, and so I know a lot of you are ed majors, but one of the big things that we would do in psychology is to diagnose people with mental disorders, okay? And so, I am not the clinician, all right? Don't touch it, don't do it. But just imagine the scenario. Here's a man, and he is diagnosed with schizophrenia, man A and man B. And you're like, what's going to happen to these two men in their lifetimes? Well, I know that they have schizophrenia, so that allows me to know certain things about them. However, there are many possible outcomes to the diagnosis, many possible things that can happen. Now, I tell you, man A has a IQ score of 84, and man B has an IQ score of 140. Now, they both have schizophrenia. What are the probable outcomes in your life? And you're like, okay, dude, that second piece of information clearly allows me to predict and understand this kid with schizophrenia way more, doesn't it? It allows me to better predict what's going to happen to him. So often intelligence tests are used to both, diagnose problems, but also to predict future outcomes as part of, as it says here, part of a larger puzzle. Okay? Part of a larger puzzle. Nope. Too boring. The Stanford-Binet, not so much. The most common one today, yeah, here's some Stanford-Binet stuff. But usually the Stanford-Binet is not the one that is most common. The most common is a Wechsler test. David Wechsler developed an intelligence test in the 30s. Different versions of it. The WIPSI, the WISC and the WAIS. The WIPSI is for preschoolers. The WISC is for children, and the WAIS is for adults. I believe it's the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, and the Wechsler Scale of Intelligence. I don't know, something about preschool. Preschool and potty training, I don't know. Whatever. Okay? And so what happens is that they provide a composite score, like a general intelligence or something, and then subscale scores for verbal scores and performance scores. Because the WAIS and the WIPSI and the WISC are actually, I have some copies in my office. They come in a briefcase. Okay, it comes in a briefcase and it's got two parts. One part is paper and pencil, and one part is all kinds of interesting stuff. I think I'm going to show you. I can't remember exactly here, but yeah, it involves things like it'll have pictures, right? Here's four pictures. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put them in order, and the boy runs outside. He rolls the first ball. He begins to build a snowman, and then he finishes it off. So, you put it together in order. Not just can you put them in order, but how fast can you put them in order. Or there'll be blocks. They're like dice, really. They're just 6-sided cubes. And they have little red and white triangle things on them and stuff. And then they'll show you a picture. Take 4 blocks and make this image. And how long does it take you to make that image happen? Or assemble an object. There's actual physical puzzles in there. But like I said, some of it is paper and pencil, and it literally involves what day of the year is Independence Day? In what way are wool and cotton alike? Okay? So what happens is that, as a fact, this is the thing. On these intelligence tests, we want to, in an ideal world, measure potential or something like that. What you have this potential of. But clearly what happens is, if you didn't grow up with wiener dogs, I think that's a wiener dog, it'd be a whole lot harder to assemble this puzzle, wouldn't it? I grew up in Wisconsin. I got an advantage on you to put together the snowman images. So what does it really mean? What does this IQ score mean? And I'm going to tell you again, I don't know. But I can tell you that whatever that score is predicts how successful you're going to be in life. So if I can assemble a wiener dog, I'm going to be successful? Well, doesn't sound fair. That is so cool, but I know that's not on your test, so I'm just not. But I do want to talk about this. Sometimes intelligence tests are misused, sometimes, I don't know. Here is an interesting one where they did a study where they analyzed the cerebral cortex thickness at various points during childhood and adolescence with a bunch of kids. They were like, take a bunch of brain scans at different points. And then they conducted IQ tests, and they divided them into 3 groups. Those that scored, whatever the scores are, I don't know, but those that had a high score, those that had an average score, and those that were, superior, high, and average, there's no lows, whatever. But, whatever. What happened was that, again, it doesn't matter exactly what it was, but the cortical thickness had a different pattern of growth in these different groups. Again, it doesn't matter what it is. Suffice it to say, it goes like this. I could take a picture of your brain, and I could predict what your IQ test score is going to be. Just imagine such a thing. granted, this is a little bit science fiction-y, but not far off. So, mom was pregnant, and they say, hey, based on our little brain scanning, we predicted your kid's IQ will be in the range of 109 to 114. You want to keep the baby, or you think you can do better next time? Oh shit. Or even more, we can select an embryo whose intelligence is going to be between here and here. Oh shit. Okay? So clearly you've crossed that point again between what you can do and what you should do. Okay? Mental retardation. Mental retardation, again, what is the definition of mental retardation? Technically, it's an IQ score of 75 or less. That's really what the number is, but just, going back in line with the very definition of what is intelligence, mental retardation is really defined as an inability to deal with the problems that the world throws at you, an inability to adapt to the environment, an inability to change the environment to suit your needs, okay? So, granted, they put a number on here, 70 or 75, depending on who you ask. But it's really an arbitrary point because it really has to do with behaviors, doesn't it? Who can and cannot manage. But anyway, children that have mental retardation learn more slowly, have difficulty solving problems, so language deficits. They do less well in school, they're difficult making friends, etc. About 2 to 3% have mental retardation, and it comes in different levels called mild, moderate, severe, and profound. And again, it's a predictive thing. If a child has been diagnosed with severe mental retardation, it tells me something about this kid and what this kid is probably likely to be capable of in the future. And this kid is probably able to have an incredibly regimented life in a mental hospital setting with perhaps work in a sheltered workshop. Somebody with moderate mental retardation is probably able to perform some tasks as long as you keep them simple and structured. They can probably live in a group home with caretakers in it. People in this category may well be able to live at home. They just may need in-home assistance once a day or something to help them with the more complicated things, such as like setting up a cell phone or something, a new cell phone plan. Oh my God. You got to be a genius to figure them damn things out. Okay, so you get the idea, though, that you may end up having. This is a predictive thing. That's the thing. We're not trying to put a label on somebody. We're trying to predict which things that these people will be capable of in life. Deficits in adaptive behavior. That's right. That's right. Okay. There's some genetic causes of mental retardation, a couple of Down syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, but it can also come from the presence of teratogens, but it can also cause from oxygen problems, as in the cord around the neck can cause brain damage, or it can even be the result of literally dropping a kid on their head when they're young. That could definitely be a cause of it. What could cause it? Lack of stimulation, etc. Children with mental retardation need consistent care from a responsible adult, and I'll tell you that children with mental retardation aren't stupid. And yet they get made fun of a lot, and they know that they're being made fun of. And they may not be able to defend themselves, and they may, as a coping strategy, pretend that they don't get it, pretend that they don't understand that they're being made fun of, or they'll laugh along with the other kids in an attempt to join that group or something. But these kids are hurt real deeply. They're hurt really deeply when they get teased, and they get teased a lot. So that's our job as parents or teachers or caregivers or whatever, to keep our eyes out for these kids, okay? To give them a little bit more, to sit the other kids down and sometimes give the other kids a little bit of a lesson in what's appropriate and what's not. We really have a big responsibility with this. On the other side of the scale, the gifted or talented children, They show achievement well above average in one or more areas, usually in language, math, music, art, or athletics. They can be globally gifted, an across-the-board thing, or unevenly gifted. Gifted or talented children, unfortunately, in the current budget crisis, this is the first group that loses funding for any extra programs for them. But I've lately been taking a hard line in my mind anyway about gifted children. Just because a kid can get straight A's does not make that kid a gifted or talented child. In my mind, I don't make the definition because I don't work at the schools. But did I tell you about my light bulb moment? I got to get my work going on that one, okay? So, it's like just because a kid can get straight A's doesn't impress me. As I said earlier, so many of the students that sit down into my classroom and they say, I had straight A's in high school. I'm like, you're shitting, right? You're kidding me. You got it. Okay. That is not gifted and talented. There are racial differences in test scores. By the way, this is another reason why intelligence scores are so controversial. Because many people see this and they say, yeah, but it's not fair. And I'm like, I got you. I understand. Because there are environmental opportunities that are available more to some people versus other people, et cetera, et cetera. And so people say intelligence test scores are biased and stuff. And I was like, well, they might be. I don't know, but here's the drill. The score that goes onto that piece of paper predicts how well you do in life. And it doesn't matter if you are a non-Hispanic white, an Asian, an African American, or a Hispanic. It doesn't matter who you are. The number that goes on that paper is a very good predictor of how successful you will be in life. But there's yeah, I got it. But that number predicts what you're going to do. It doesn't matter who you are. It's the same prediction for everybody. So yes, we may, as a society, need to address why this is true. But the fact that these numbers come out differently tells us that there's going to be different success rates associated with them. Now, are they culturally biased? Yes. Here we go. Are they culturally biased? Yes. Some people have less experience with this stuff. To examine inadequate educational placements. In that way, yes, they are culturally biased. But I again argue that the ability to predict success in life is the same for everybody. So it's something we need to deal with, sure. We need to know what it is. Useful for get access to future functioning. Ooh, that's a lot of words. Okay. This is an interesting one that is reserved for a class where you sit in my room. It's not a good one to just talk to a camera about. All right. Infants are born with some abilities for math already. I mean, it's an amazing thing. I saw one time. It was so cool. This video where they got these babies doing math. It was just nuts. They took advantage of the habituation and stuff. And they were like, they would go put teddy bears up, and then they would put up a screen, and then they would drop the screen, and it was just, and then they would show them putting teddy bears in and out and stuff. And then they would sneak around, and they'd have somebody that was underneath the table and would reach up behind and pull out teddy bears and freak out the kids. And when you drop the screen and the number of teddy bears is what it's supposed to be, the kids are like, all right, yeah, whatever. But if they drop the screen and the number of teddy bears that the kids see don't match what they think should be there because of the math part, because remember, you're sneaky researcher, you just reach under the table, or reach from under the table and swipe one. And the kids are like, oh my God. So kids are like 6 months old, and they can add 2 plus 3. They got it worked out. Subitizing. I've never heard of this before this class, by the way. Infants may enumerate small sets by subitizing, a process by which people quickly and easily determine how many objects are in a small set without actually counting them. I want to take a little moment here just to point out something The mathematical skills that we take for granted in our society are kind of not as universal as we might think. There are many, many cultures in this world where when you look at their language, they have words that go one, two, many. They have no more words for numbers. One, two, and many. And so they can't hardly tell the difference between 4 and 5. They can't, here is 5 tick marks. Just copy it down. Nothing, they can't do it. They don't have the words one, two, and many. So we find that even as simplest things, the simplest mathematical skills require environmental stimulation. It requires an environment that brings it out. From age 2, children begin to associate words that they use in their language with a number of objects. Okay? Language differences affect learning to count and understanding place value, which affect, okay. Children begin to develop counting strategies at about age 4. But the one I remember working very hard on my kids, and it's amazing. This is Piaget, man. Remember when he was like, when the kids ain't ready, the kids ain't ready, okay? And I can still remember this. It was so frustrating. My kid would want to count things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I was like, I tried so hard to convince my kid at some point. I was like, okay, this hand will always have 5 fingers. You don't need to count it every single time. You could just go 5, 6. You could start at 5 because it's always got 5 fingers. Nothing. Whew, over the kid's head. They're like, okay, Daddy, I got it. 1, 2. Oh, dude, what's up with this? All right. Well, I tried that one. Eventually, I'm hoping they pick that counting strategy. Yeah. In elementary school, children improve efficiency. They store basic math facts. This is actually really interesting. Again, I told you this earlier when I told you one of my goals this summer is to have my daughter master multiplication. I mean, she knows multiplication. Like I said, you give her, what's 8 times 7? So we're like, just give me a minute, Daddy. 56. I'm like, okay, cool. As she's performing some mental operation in her head, I think she's probably doing a skip count. 8, 16, 24. I'm pretty sure that's what she did. I don't know. She's probably doing a skip counting like this. 8, 16, 24 until she gets the, right? So that's cool. That's fine. That's probably their plan of action at this point. But my goal is to literally make a mental shortcut. Here is 8 times 7. Here is 56. Wire them together. That's what you do. You wire together 56. Because the more of these things that you wire together, the faster you can flash out the answer, the easier later math becomes. And so there is I still remember when I was in 3rd and 4th grade, maybe even all the way up to 5th, that one of the grades on my report card, a specific grade, was knowledge of the times tables. Okay? That's it. That was a whole grade all by itself. And it was important. And it really, really is. And I now recognize why it was there. And I mean, I always had a perfect score on that. I mastered my times tables early, and that was hugely important. Okay? Strategy choice model. Solve math problem by choosing the fastest. Yeah, whatever. I don't know anything about that. But look at the median counting level in the United States and in China. Oh shit. Kids in a 5-year-old in America can count to about 50. A 5-year-old in China can count to about 100. Uh-oh. We're in trouble. I have no idea what this is. You ed majors, if you feel like figuring it out, I'm willing to bet that in one of your ed classes they made you learn about this developmental math and stuff. I don't know anything about it. It's not my kind of thing. Children gain facility with mathematical word problems. I like this. Context is important. I remember one example. I don't remember where. It must have been from this text. I don't know. And they talk about this kid that had to drop out of school in El Salvador. And she asked the kid to do some math problems and stuff. And the kid's like, what? Oh. But then you know what you do? You say this. You say, all right, son. let's say you got 4 papayas and each one costs, 47 colones. Oh wait, that was the wrong country. He's from Costa Rica now. The kid's from Costa Rica. And each one costs 47 colones, and your customer gives you a 1,000 colone note. How much change should you give this customer? And it's like the kid's like, oh, and just gives you the answer, okay? So the kid who fails in math, when you talk about a scenario that he might possibly have in his life, boom, he's got it, okay? Bugs. Again, I swear this has got to be something that you ed majors have been learning about, because this is not something I have ever seen in my life before it comes up into this book, okay? Borrow across zero. I don't know what this means. I have no idea. If you're an ed major, I would read this, all right? I don't know this stuff at all. Developmental stages for reading. All right, here, this is big. I'm going to tell you something that here in our university, we got problems. In fact, I've been having some problems, hopefully not with you guys, right? But I've been having some problems with papers that are coming back, and they just suck. They're bad. They're just bad papers. And so I'm trying to tell students, okay, what I want you to do is read them aloud, okay? Read them to yourself and listen for where it sounds weird, and then you can fix it, And students tell me, oh yeah, I did that, okay? And that didn't work. So I have them read, somebody else. And what somebody said to me was kind of insightful. He goes, you know what? I think you got a situation where you don't necessarily have a writing problem, but you have a reading problem. That they are not up to par on the reading. And so then it's reflected in the writing, okay? It's reflected. But ultimately, the writing is just a symptom of the problem, and the problem is the reading. And that's true. The reading scores have shot down, down, down. And it doesn't make sense to me because, as we said, the curriculum is focusing so heavily on the 3 R's at the expense of everything else nowadays. How the hell can those 3 R's not be shooting through the roof? I don't get it, okay? 25% of Americans are poor readers. 38% of 4th graders score below grade level. 2 factors that best predict success in early reading are familiarity with letters of the alphabet and phonemic awareness. Oh my God! I'm telling you, this is what I did when I was my kids were little. We had a poster kind of a thing that we had on the wall. It was actually really nice. It was made out of cloth with a wood border. It was almost like a painting, sort of. But it had the letter. It was just letters of the alphabet with a picture. A, apple, B, ball, whatever. But what I would do with both of my kids when they were little is before bedtime we would sit there in front of that thing, probably for 6 months or something, when they were like two or 2.5 or something, and we would sit there, A, apple, B, ball, C, car. And we did this, oh my God, I'm not even kidding you, 20 minutes a night for 6 months on this one stupid thing. And did it pay off? Damn, I hope so, because that was some painful shit, I'm telling you that. What? Developmental stages for reading. Again, ed majors, feel free to read all of that, because you as ed majors probably need to know that. I, however, have never heard these things before. Phonemic awareness is the understanding that words are made up of small units of sound called phonemes. Yeah. There's a couple of things when it comes to reading with kids. To me, the most important thing I taught, the first step, the book didn't talk about it, but the first step was convincing a kid that reading is important, that reading is something cool, that reading is something that will be good for them. Okay? And so I set my kids up in certain scenarios where can you read this? Oh, that's too bad, because it tells you how to open the jar so that you can get the yummy candy that's inside. But sorry, you can't read, so you can't get it, So I set up these scenarios for my kids to teach them, to convince them that the act of reading was of an incredible importance and something which would be very good for them. Okay? Now let's talk about this. Phonemic awareness. The basic understanding that words are not just random gibberish, okay? They're not gibberish. That there are patterns, that there are rules, that once you understand one, it can help you in the knowledge of the others, okay? Understanding involves associating printed letters with sounds that go with them. Ba, 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 ba. Children automatize word recognition after developing phonemic awareness. Yes, they do. Automaticity. Reading is a very automatic thing. We do not stop. It's an amazing talent, actually, when you stop to think about how good we are at reading. I mean, you do not have to. When words pop across your sight, you do not have to stop and think about the reading. The act of reading just happens automatically. In fact, it is so automatic that it's not that we have to turn on the skill of reading, but we find it damn near impossible to turn the skill of reading off. There's an interesting psych test. It's called the Stroop test, and no details here, but suffice it to say, they find that if you ask somebody to not read, it freaks the shit out of them. They just can't. You can't not read. You can't do it. It's just not something you can choose to not do once you become a master at it. Good readers tend to read more, further enhancing reading skills and facilitating cognitive development. Absolutely. Again, it's summer. I got a plan of action on my kids. Both of my kids are required to read 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon. At any given time, my kids are required to be reading classic books, because not only do I want them to actually physically read, I've heard so many of these people say, well, if my kid just reads anything, even if it's a comic book, it's good for him. And I'm like, yeah, but wouldn't it be better if your kid was actually learning something? You know, like they read The Man in the Iron Mask and they kind of get a little bit about French history, a little bit. Yeah, it's a fictional book, but Alexandre Dumas, when he wrote the book, wasn't stupid. You know, he wrote it about France in the 1700s. So, you know, knowledge of France in some way. So when my kids read it, they're getting something a little bit more. Okay? Parent-child reading during preschool years may have a small direct effect, but several indirect effects. As I said, the indirect effect of reading to my kids, again, in my mind, was the instilling in my kids that it was an important skill to have. That it was a skill which would allow them to do certain things that they wanted to do. Okay? And that was perhaps the biggest thing in my mind. Yeah, there's a lot of correlations between. That's an interesting image. Whatever. Where am I at? Okay, yeah. Reading and writing skills are highly correlated. Okay. Inventive spelling. Whatever. Struck their own. Yeah, it's actually very cute to get inventive spelling. But you know what? When your kids write something with inventive spelling, you better save it, because it stops pretty quick. And it's cute as shit, man. When your kids make up their own spelling for words, it's awesome. You will love it. But save them, because it goes away really, really fast. As they construct, though, they're gaining practice, because the inventive spellings usually follow the rules of phonemics, right? They usually do. Okay. Children's writing tends to be from an egocentric perspective. Not a surprise, because as Piaget told us, so does their thinking. Young writers tend to engage in something called knowledge telling. They don't organize their thoughts. They just sort of, blah. Hey, wait a minute. That's what college students do. Blah. Nah, man. But as they get older, you start to get more organization. They start to, you know, an introduction, a body, a conclusion. I mean, something. There's more organization as the children get older. Children that get older spend more time planning and revising. Problems with academics involving communication disorders and learning disorders. Learning disorders tend to be skill-specific. Reading disorders, mathematics disorders, writing disorders. It's really actually quite interesting how it works. I'll just give you one that I am familiar with. Again, this is outside of my realm, but I'm going to give you one that I am familiar with, and that is kids with what is the one where dyslexia, and it's very cool. Most children, when they read words, let's say regular words and irregular words. A regular word is one whose phonetics matches is correct. So a regular word might involve ball. Or even, let me give it a 5-letter word. C-R-A-F-T, craft. Okay? And another 5-letter word. This is a regular word. And then this is an irregular word. Let's pick an irregular word like yacht. And it doesn't follow any rules of phonetics, none at all. And so lo and behold, when normal children without dyslexia, are reading the word craft, one part of the brain is active. When they read the word yacht, a different part of the brain is active. Literally, this involves a phonetic awareness. This involves pure memorization. A child with dyslexia, however, both regular and irregular words activate simple memory areas. In other words, a child with dyslexia literally memorizes every single word, both regular and irregular, just memorizes them, does not have a phonetic awareness of them. And so what happens is a normal child without dyslexia might get a new word. I'm going to try to make one up here. Okay, brogy. There you go. Brogy. And what happens is a kid without dyslexia who reads using phonetic awareness would go, brogy. Okay, I got it. A kid with dyslexia would say, I have no idea what the hell that is. You say, that says brogy, and the kid goes, okay, let me put that in my memory structure. Now the next time I see that, I'll remember it's brogy. But I cannot on my own get that the first time because I do not run using the rules of phonemic awareness. So, very cool thing. I mean, that there is a biological truth to the learning disability. It's not just, something that you talk about and put on paper. There's a biological truth to it. Children with communication disorders might have problems producing speech sounds or understanding what other people are saying. Learning disorders, as we said, often involve specific skills. They're often underdiagnosed and then untreated, and that's very simple, and that's because parents never want to admit that their children have troubles. Any troubles? In fact, I just watched a movie this weekend. It was different, but same kind of an idea. It was called We Need to Talk About Kevin. And this kid, their son Kevin, was really having problems, and mom saw it, but the kid was a little angel in front of dad, and they never did. They never really sat down and said, okay, this kid's got problems, okay? Because parents don't want to admit it. The father kept like, oh, he's just a boy. He's just doing boy stuff. And the mom's like, no, trust me, The kid is so disobedient, he willfully craps his own pants at 7 years old just to make me clean it up, okay? This is, we need to talk about is a very, very important thing. But no parent wants to admit that their kid could possibly fall into this category. And so the first line of defense against learning disorders are the parents, and they're the ones that don't want to talk about or admit. Okay? Strongly genetic and related to abnormalities in how the brain functions, like I said with the dyslexia thing. Sometimes the disorders correct themselves, or the children learn ways to compensate. Yeah, the kid with dyslexia learns to memorize. Families can learn to provide more effective support for children. Okay, whatever. Okay. So we talked a little bit about intelligence and academic skills. So I believe that does this put us at the end of the material for this exam? I don't remember. What do we got? No, I'm going to talk one more, language development, before we get to the exam. So we're getting closer to that second one, but we're going to talk about language. We already hinted at language in several ways. That is, children's ability to count is greatly enhanced by the ability to access those words associated with numbers, 2, 3, 4, 5. Their ability to think is associated with language. Remember, we talked about categories, and we talked about how language enhances thinking. And in fact, we're going to talk in language development, and it's going to be like language is thought. Thought is language. And we're going to have this whole controversy going on. Suffice it to say, language is perhaps the guiding structure on which all cognition must hang itself. We'll talk about that one the next time we get together.